And so I was like, fuck, man, like this is the boat crew thing. Like I gotta, because each of us are our own little tribe, right? Like there are 3 stages in a team. It's formation, growth, and sustainment.
What is up, fellow Legacy Ninja? Welcome to the next episode of the Legacy Digging Podcast. How often have you gone through life and have faced such a low in your life that you thought you would be better off not being part of the world or being part of society? When you sat there and thought about it, what was that end result of, if you were gone, what was the impact that you'd have on other people because of you not being around and not being present? Sometimes those dark journeys that we go along are necessary for us to really impact the lives of others and to give a voice to others that feel like they don't have a voice. So on this episode, we had a phenomenal conversation with Riley Smith. Word of warning, if you have kids that are listening to the podcast, this episode may not be one of those episodes that you want them to listen to or hear. Also, just a word of warning too, sometimes when individuals go through a dark journey, a dark spot, the low lows, ultimately to get through that, it's the joking and it's the humor that helps them get through that and to heal. And so within the conversation with Riley, he really became open and vulnerable with sharing that dark path that he's been down, how that has led him to where he's at now, what he wants to create legacy-wise, and how he wants to impact the lives of others. Within the episode, we talk about being the change you want to see, being the change that impacts the lives of others. We talk about the power of your pain to springboard you forward to your dreams and your vision and what you're trying to build legacy-wise. And the power of using previous dreams, previous motivations as fuel to drive you towards those bigger ideas, those bigger purposes that you have within life. So after the episode, take the time and really see what it is for you that maybe it was the dark spot, maybe it was a low point that you're scared to share and you don't want to show up and share with others. But understand the power of what that does for others by being vulnerable and transparent and just being a human. We all have a story that's meant to be shared. You have a story that's powerful and is meant to be heard by somebody else. Don't hold back. Other than that, enjoy the episode, and we'll catch you later. What is up, fellow Legacy Ninjas? We want to welcome you to the next part of the journey here with the legacy digging process and having our guests that we know come on and share what they are doing with creating their legacy, how they're living it, and just those different points that they may drop that is the item that you need in regards to digging that legacy. So we got Scott Brent,
Patrick Murakami, and
The Flaming Dragon, baby. No, Riley Smith.
Yep. So we had the pleasure of meeting Riley about a couple months ago, and just his story, his energy, and what he's about really fits in here. Patrick and I talked about the fact that meeting Riley and just seeing where he's at and what he's bringing to the forefront, he's got a lot that will be coming out, and I think we see it in him, and I think he's starting to tap into it. But it's the sharing process of somebody that's early on is starting to do some big things and wanting to make some changes in the endeavor that is the passion and the fuel for them. And so, Riley, when you look and you consider the legacy piece and what that means to you, what does that pertain?
The legacy, I guess we'll shift fire. So I came a little unprepared. Dude, legacy to me is... legacy is, it's not about you, right? Like that's why legacy is so important. The word legacy is super important because you're gone. Nobody gives a shit about you anymore. And like we come and go and are dust and just this energy that can be blown away, but a legacy cannot. A legacy, an idea, is more powerful than a person and what you leave behind. And so legacy is important because it's right. That's what you leave behind for other people. So for me, that's what it means is day in, day out, like staying focused, laser focused on like that one central goal and like continuing to develop that so you have something to leave behind. And for me, I think about like my brothers and I think about my brother's kids. And I'm like, shit, man, like, you know what, like you have, the know-how and the resources and whatever to just pack up, move to Northeast, like Maine, move to out of the country, whatever, go be a hermit and just like, smack it and lift weights and run. But I'm like, fuck, like if I do that, what's my legacy? And then people say, well, why do you give a shit about legacy? Like, well, because other people matter more than I do. And I'm like, not even just my people, like my brothers and their kids are representations of like my boys and their kids and their kids. Like I care about Pat's kids and your kids, like, and their kids. And like, it's important. Right. And if we don't think about that and take a second to step back and elevate above our own ego and our own bullshit and realize that like, man, even if it means tearing yourself down, like really tearing yourself down. And we know what the fuck that means. Like, each person relatively to that level, dude, that's what you got to do, what you got to do. It's worth it. Like this endeavor, it's a life worth living. Like legacy is like, it's a life worth living. That's a why that you can grip onto and fucking like live. It'll keep you alive. Like legacy is important. This is an important podcast.
That's question one, everybody, for those of you who are listening, right? So again, we've had the pleasure of getting to know Riley. The first time we did a recording for a live podcast, and it was really incredible, honestly, man. Like we enjoyed it so much. In fact, I connected to you, I think, with 3 or 4 people that evening or the next day, right?
Yeah.
Of people that I thought, because you talked about writing a book, some other people whom I thought would be really great. What's awesome about the whole thing is that the journey that you shared, right? And so what I want to tap into, just to kind of allow the legacy ninjas who are listening to this really understand kind of the path that you've gotten to where you're here, and then we'll resume kind of the next portion as to where you're headed.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and you can start wherever you want to, honestly, in regards to
absolutely. That. Yeah. Grew up in Indiana, did the athlete thing the best I could, always was kind of channeled into that leadership role. I always felt the pull to take care of the younger kids, the scrawnier kids, like things like that. I was always pulled to serve in some way. When I was about 12 years old, I started 12, 13. I knew at 9 with minor league baseball, as I've been thinking and writing and kind of going through my subconscious and things like that. Also, the last podcast, I took so much weed to like calm down, like so much THC. It actually like got me all excited. So I was all weird. And I was also, I guess we'll get there at some point, but I was also, microdosing or macrodosing at times with 5-ants to stay up. And I was an insomniac, and I was driving myself insane to build that legacy. So last time I was a little bit of a weirdo, right? I'm always kind of a weirdo, like you don't do the things that, we've each done or whatever and not be a weirdo. But around 12, 13, I knew I wanted to be a commando and lead commandos into combat. I remember crying and cutting myself because I felt bad that I like wasn't in Vietnam, like covering these dudes and shit. I was like, what a weirdo. Like, why do you feel this way? But I feel this way. I felt so bad. And I had so much passion to serve and to kill people and to bad people and to protect good people. And I trained hard and I felt that way, like on the football field, like, I'm like, man, if I don't fill this hole, like fucking he's going to have to fill this hole and he's going to get broke. So like, I'll just get broke. And like that shit, it was always inside me. Right. And like all this stuff. And so I'm going through middle school, high school and cutting myself and starts in self-harm and like all this like spiral down, right? Do what I have to do because at the time, read every book in the library, listen to all the podcasts, like still like same way, like always reading, always writing, always listening, like trying to learn and get better and tame this demon hell monster that's inside me. So I go to the Naval Academy because naively I thought like that's the best place. And like I was fat, like I wasn't in that great of shape because like this depression, like I was going home and eating like bowls of peanut butter with like fucking whipped cream on it. Like I was like, but I was lifting hard and running and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And like poisoning myself. And so by the grace of God, get a senator to sign off, like do all these interviews and shit, go through all this, get the appointment, go to the prep school, spend a year at Naval Station Newport, Rhode Island, pass Naval Academy Preparatory School, graduate that, go down to Annapolis, Maryland, do that gig the whole time, just belligerently depressed. And like the whole time, like as we all go through, being told you're not shit, you can't do shit, like it comes out pretty quick when you're the dude that's like working the hardest and carrying the rucks and running and doing pull-ups and working out all the time that like you want to be a SEAL team guy. And so as soon as that gets out, like Katie barred the door, like you're about to get a lot of knives your way because, dudes want to do it too. And it's everyone that's insecurity. And so you point it outward oh, I'm afraid I can't be a SEAL. So actually, hey, fuck you, across the room. And I fell prey to that too. Like it was a competition, there are only so many slots. And so it's like, if you can run PSYOP, warfare on these dudes or whatever, and it's a competition until you get to like the selection process. Then it's a competition plus like you get broke down where like you want to help your boys. Like you also want to remember like this is about being a good dude and like you need to lead and shit. But cutting myself throughout there, I know what it feels like to, bleed out on the floor. I've done that now 2 or 3 times, and so I'm going through dealing with this. I run triathlon, shot for the Navy for a year, did some dynamic shooting. I moved on to triathlon, which is where I knew I needed to be to achieve the SEAL team thing. Go there, I just was surrounded by some great people and was able to train hard, broke my body totally down, torn shoulders, knees, hips, all of it, go through all the selection process, do what I have to do to get the top spots. Don't end up going the SEAL team route. Instead had the surgeries on the shoulders and hips. That was soul crushing. I remember that night, that was the first time I'd ever done alcohol as a drug. Like this is the first time I had ever done, like a class 1 or whatever. And I did cocaine at Acme, this bar. So I did cocaine in there and then went back to my room and just fucking laid into my arm, and like one of my first tattoos is this like quote here on my arm, and it's about family. And because I would cry into my arms, I would cut myself and cut my legs and stuff. And so I wanted to like try to stay alive. I started getting tattoos. So I like read them and like, try to fucking help me live. The reason I'm sharing these things, right, is because I want people to understand it's okay to share these things and be like totally vulnerable. And it also is laying this foundation for like where I'm going, this legacy thing, right? Like why this is important to me. Like you have to have context to understand like the why, how, and the what, to like where I'm going and what I'm going to do. And so cut myself living, with a blaster in my mouth forever, ruin relationships left and right, like went from being like Mr. Popular relatively, to, like that dude, I guess nuclear, right? Like that dude is like always depressed. That dude is always like in a bad spot. And it's like, yeah, motherfucker, like I'm always there for you and you're in a bad spot, So it's this double-edged sword, like it always is, like somewhere in the middle, like, yeah, I know I got to like work on my own shit, but like I'm always there for you. And like, let's meet in the middle. And so I have abandonment issues and trust issues and big issues with depression and suicide. And I'm as familiar as anyone with that world. I can talk that shit for days, and yes. I do these days. And
that I know. So
yeah. And so get those orders pulled. So like everything I'd ever worked for, took the #1 spots for consistently forever, pulled for me. And so that was my dream. That was who I was. That was what I knew I was born to do. And got sent to a ship, which is like a fate worse than death. So for dudes like me. And so go to a ship, an officer on the ship, do what I have to do, deploy. Midway through deployment, I get flown off because I snagged that #1 or 2 spot. And it was 1 or 2. It was 2 because I wasn't there long enough to be the #1 guy. And that's the captain was like, this is why I'm signing off, to fly you off and spend all this money to get you back to selection out in Coronado. And so get flown off, go back, doing fine, performing. And I'm in this one Evo that I like fucking smashed several years before. And I know exactly how to do it. And I mean, I'm fucking just getting it. And like to the point where I'm low crawling, however far, and the dude stops me. And I can't fucking breathe. I got sandal in my mouth, and my dick's chafed all the way off. And he's like, look behind you. And I look behind me. I can't even fucking see the other people. I'm like, okay, let's go, baby. And like, so I'm like, go. Like I'm not out of the fight. Like Riley got broke, surgeries. He's older. He's fucking like coming back just straight off deployment, right? Actually, I got to go home first, train for a few weeks, and then go back. So it wasn't that. Let's not embellish here, but whatever. And he comes back and he's not the muscular dude. He's not like the dude, like he's the unassuming guy. And I still had it. So I was like, fuck yeah, Riley, like, let's go. In the middle of this evolution, starts feeling like, if you guys ran over and put a couple of bike pumps in my legs and in my shoulders and just, I was out, and then I was in the hospital. And so it was some rhabdo, had a heat stroke and they said it was a seizure. And then had the ruck that I was carrying at the time, like when I passed out, like, you fall down, the ruck weight goes through your head. And so a little bit more brain trauma that I certainly don't need. Woke up after all this shit that I put in. Like, I wish I would have died there. I really do. Now I don't as much. I'm coping with that. But for a very long time, up until, really now, and like, I still kind of wish I would have died there. And part of me did die there. and I've lost a lot of me and found more. I lost a lot of me, but what I'm realizing is you can pick up more energy as you go and rebuild yourself. She comes in and says, hey, when you get out of here, like, get your shit, like, you're done. And like treating me like I'm like some kind of quitter or something. And I'm like, I defeated, like, rebroken, you know? It was just horrible. And when I got back to the compound over there at Bud's, I just told the EOD doc, like, I was like, senior, like, I'm going to fucking kill myself. Like, I can't fucking do this anymore. Like, this is bullshit. Like, they're sending me back to this. Like, I'm going to kill myself. And I was like totally resigned to the fact. I was like, man, I know what it feels like. Like, I'll fucking do it. Like, I don't care. Like, and like, what's kept me alive is like the thought of like, and I tell everybody it's my favorite game to play in a fucked up way, like under the chin, in the mouth, or side, the side of the head. And I'm like, what would make what I've always balanced it off of is like, what would make my mom the least sad? Like, like, should I do an open casket? If I go here, open, because this is going to fuck me up. This is going to give me a bad hair day. But this might be it. And I've done it and I've practiced it thousands of times at this point. Like, click with snap caps, and do 2 snap caps and then a live round, and then do no mag loaded, and like to test that trigger pressure, and then get so scared and shaky and start bawling and throw it. And I know what it feels like to do all of that. And then when you don't do that, you're laying into yourself with a blade. And so, and if it's not that, it was always booze. Like, I was a fucking alcoholic, man. Like, I pregame with and I lied, to get through all this shit. Like, like self-diagnosed alcoholic, but like I could get diagnosed pretty fucking quick. Like, I was pre-gaming with a bottle of Jameson before I go out. I've been in more bar fights than like I care to like admit, like I was beating the fuck out of people. And like, it was always like, it was never like I was going out like in my head, like, I'm pissed, I'm depressed, I'm a badass, like I'll beat up anybody. And like, so if one thing would go wrong, like I would shirk it off. But then like if somebody, alcohol induced, like somebody thinks they're big or tough or whatever, like I remember this dude, is big wake up call for me. Like somebody pushed, I was like out with all my like SEAL team bros or like prospective SEAL team bros. You feel pretty invincible. Like when you got a bunch of dudes you've been through like training, and like you got all these big beefy bastards that are like, they will rip your head off. Like, and my boy Ben gets pushed at this bar, and man, it's like, oh no. So it's like, it's game on, baby. Like it's murder time. And so I remember my boy Tom ended up, because I'm like blacked out drunk too. Like I'm browning out, I'm on my way to blackout. And Tom, who's like this massive motherfucker, like I don't know how much Tom's fat ass weighs, but he's got a 6-pack. He's like the, king of the basketball team, 6'6", and 200 and what the fuck ever 30, and just rocks me. And I don't even remember like getting rocked really, but I remember waking up the next day at one of the sponsor guys' houses, and when I woke up, the boys were like, go look in the mirror, and they looked like they'd seen a monster. My face was just caked in. My tooth had come through my fucking lip. That's why my mustache all fucked up on the side. But damn it, like old me. And damn it, Riley, when I was younger. The mustache. But I don't know how I got off on that, but get flown back out, do all this shit. That was back in college. That was even before this. I guess I start going into the records. But anyway, get out of that, retire from the military, finally medically retired 100%. After I get with Doc, it starts this process where I can finally get medically retired, take a new, bought a house, have the dogs. Navy gave me like a week or two. They like let me know that I was going to be retiring. I needed to find a job and all that shit. And I was like, well, thanks. I just bought the house and I got the dogs and the shit. And so took a new career out here, moved across the country because I knew I wanted to be in the mountains, wanted to be away from the SEAL teams, like need to be away from the East Coast and West Coast, need to be in a new environment. And this place has been great for me. This has been a place of healing. I came out here also to smoke weed and, 420 blaze and all day, every day. No, I'm just kidding. But I wasn't for a minute, but not now, but came out here for that and just to get my mind right. And so this is a place of healing. Like when I think about Colorado Springs, I'm like, man, this is like, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Like, this is my town. And like, when you get treated bad or like, I've been through some things in the recent past that I'll come out about, will, reveal some truth and some dirty truths and some things like that. But I'm like, man, like you fuckers aren't going to push me out of this city. You're not pushing me out of this town. And like, you think you may have killed me and like, swept me under the rug again, but like you haven't. you called me nuclear and you think that the rug can hold me. That's not very well played out. Like, you didn't really think that one through. Like, I really wouldn't play with Bruce Banner or Bruce Wayne, and like, I can be all those people and I am all those people. And so anyway, that kind of sets the foundation for this legacy thing and what I'm fired up to get, what I am into, I'm deeply, decisively engaged into. So long answer, and I'm always long-winded. Sorry, boys.
No.
Brevity is not my strong suit.
That's all good. I think one thing really for any ninja that's listening to this, that's out there digging their own legacy and trying to help others to extract that, I think it's really that taking precedence that even if you're at a low point, you still have something out there to live for. You have something out there to go after and help grow, whatever that is. And I think based on what you shared right there, that's a powerful piece that somebody really needs to chew on, because everybody's in a different walk of life and they may think that they're at a low point, but there's somebody else out there that's gone through something a lot worse. And I think it's a matter of just putting your situation in perspective and understanding that every day above ground is a better day than 6 feet under the ground.
For sure.
And so I know with what you're building and what you're creating, the mental health piece is one of those biggest endeavors in the realm that you're striving for. And I know that hits really high with Patrick, but I think that's something that if somebody's, as they're listening to this, that's something to really extract and take the time to sit down and think about and chew on.
Well, I think Bradley said it best. You know, there is a low point when you can't even complete that task, because I couldn't even do that. Right. But I understand that, because you feel like that you couldn't even do the thing that you set out to do. Right. You couldn't complete the one thing that you feel like would end it all. And so I remember being in that low point thinking, like, if I can't even do this, I'm never going to be able to get shit done. So I totally understand. And I respect the fact that you talk about that. And again, I know this sets us up for the next segment to talk about what you're building, where you're going, where is this legacy piece headed. But I think it's super important. And I'm glad that you paused this right here to acknowledge that, because there are a lot of people hurting. There are a lot of people that are going through similar situations. They're playing their version of that game, right? I remember doing the same thing, you know, writing out, hey, can you take care of this, right? Having this email or this file that people would have all these different directions of things that I wanted them to do, right? But then I realized I'm just being a burden for all these things, you know? So let's talk about where you're at now. Where are we ascending to? What are all the different things?
Man. Real quick, man, like as far as that burden thing, man, that's a tough battle, right? With mental health, is being like, man, am I more of an asset? You're two things in this world. You're an asset or a liability. And I learned that from an old damn neck, SEAL Team Sex guy, and Evan, and he says, man, you're either a fucking liability or you're an asset. And you get that in your head, and it's a powerful tool, but you're like, man, I'm such a fucking liability. Like, I really need to take myself out of the game. And something that's important with mental health is a lot of people battle it because they're like, man, resiliency, like a person I'm not a big fan of that had a big hand in this change in my life, career change. He signs off resiliency, and I'm like, you don't have a fucking clue. Like, and these, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But it's like, man, like if it's not happening to you, right, it's really easy to say resiliency and like, don't kill yourself. I love when people say like, don't kill yourself. It's the most selfish thing in the world. And I'm like, you need to take a step back and think about what you're saying, bro, because you've never been there clearly. And so I'm like, man, like, of course, nobody wants to fucking kill themselves. Like, do you think you wake up and like, you're like, I want to be a liability today? Like, how can I like be a burden to like society and my family? And like, how can I be the most miserable fuck that I can be? It's like, you don't think that. And so people that are like in that game, like with the way society has gone, we're all ingesting so much poison, whether it's like blue light or what you're hearing and listening and sitting in front of computers all day, talking to people that hate you and talk shit to you and all this negativity swirling around. It's like, you might not get it yet, but at some point in your life, you may, and you will experience that. And you will want someone to reach out, and you will want someone to care. And you're going to want someone, like me, Pat and Scott, that are like, hey, bro, it's okay. I got you. And remember when you were an asshole and now you're at the bottom and you're reaching out? Like, I'm trying everything inside to give you the pen and not the sword, because God, it's hard. And that's kind of the battle now. But that burden thing, and that, it's important to be a trooper, a warrior, a sentinel in this war that we fight for our freedom in this nation and in this world and in our own minds. So talking about, what it's setting up for now, that's my why, right? Like that's foundation to what I'm doing. Right. And so it's like, okay, I can do, when you realize like, oh shit, I can do anything I fucking want, and anyone can, right? Especially like you unlock your brain through, I talked about a lot last time, like through psychedelics and THC and introspective, thought and exercises and things like that. And getting over and trying to wrangle that hell beast that is fear and complacency. Through that battle, I realized, man, okay, so I'm going to form essentially a boat crew, and I still got to, get with some lawyers and some website people and lock some things down. But basically what I'm forming is a boat crew. And so, when you go through and like, I'm sure I'll receive some like negative feedback, and I don't give a shit, like from the SEAL community or the special operations community, because anyone that knows me knows that like, I'm not like out here pretending to be like a SEAL or a team guy or whatever, but in training, right? Like everyone knows like whether you watched American Sniper or Lone Survivor, like everybody's seen the documentaries of BUD/S, right? And so you're either under the log or under the boat, whatever. That's your boat crew. You have variable 7-man team. And so what I realized is like, fuck. And like, I was preaching this at the old job. I've always preached this. Is like, man, like people don't understand this in the civilian world, and we don't understand it, or we forget it as, our dudes, homies that are like former special operators that want to like go hole up by themselves and their family in the woods and just like fuck society. And so we forget the power of the boat crew. And it's the same thing as like the round table. And I had this epiphany that like a round table, like with Arthur, like, man, like if you just pick this table up, now we have like a boat, like, I'm like, shit, man. And like, hey, Scott, motherfucker, if you're not carrying your weight, like I'm going to boot you in the chest. Like, and it's like, dude, 3 dudes under this boat, this table is like, that's a lot of weight. That's pretty hard. And then we find like the right dude that we know is not going to quit. Hey, bro, like come over here, run this 2 spot, like run this spot, like, and you get under and you have oh man, the weight slider, like no shit. And then you have like 2 other dudes and 2 other dudes. And so I'm forming a collective right now to, at the tactical level, right, we're going to get it worked out algorithmically where, hey, Mr. Investor that doesn't have the time to hear about all 9,000, veteran nonprofits. Instead, we go through, develop this algorithm. We have a singular, Dropbox. We split it between mental, spiritual, and physical, because that's what I'm all about, is this full spectrum fitness. Like you can't just be a jacked, tan, and sexy long dick dude and be like, yo, I'm mentally healthy. Like, no, you're not. Like, didn't you just like try to kill yourself? And so it's like you go in there as Mr. Investor. So you walk in, Investor X has dollars Y. He's like, I don't have time to research this. I just want a place where I can legally hide my money so I can get rich and also feel good about where I hide my money. And I'm like, Roger, we don't care really your why. We just need your resources. And so, because we'll do the why part. And they say, great, thanks. And so here's your receipt, write that off, later. And so we go in, we drop this in this bucket, whether, hey, do you want to support the spiritual mission? We make it sexy, clean. I support the spiritual mission, the mental mission, and the physical mission. Well, we're going to what about the physical? Okay, dope. Do you see any, foundations that pop out to you? No, I told you I don't have time for this shit. Okay, well, drag and drop your money right here. Based off the algorithm, it spits out X percent, Y percent, A through Z percent to all these people that are in the game that deserve a cut of that money. So you do it mathematically. And so right now I'm turning qualitative, because everything is like measured qualitatively, and now I've got to turn it into ones and zeros quantitatively so we can get the money worked out and make things from the cloud Y, which fucking everybody loves existing at this dreamer level, which is dope. And they don't talk about the how and the what because we're complacent. We haven't listened to enough podcasts. We haven't read enough books. We haven't hit rock bottom enough. We haven't bled out and had our 2 puppies lick our blood up as you die, where you care enough. It's a lack of care. And so you're complacent and you're fucking afraid to do things and say things because, you'll get fired. I'll get this. Like, I'll get judged for looking like manic or whatever, or called, these labels slapped on you. And it's like, I stopped caring because I started realizing, man, like most people just have so much poison in them that like, they don't even know what's going on, like, and I can figure out how much poison you have, like in a couple of questions. Like, when's the last time you fucked your wife? Like, when's the last time you went on a walk with your dog and your kids? Like, this is no cap. Like, these are serious things. Like, and there's no reason for all the hate and the negativity. Like, we all just want more time and more money so we can fucking suck. And like that is the tackle. That's humor trying to break down this barrier, right? And make everybody like kind of lighten up, myself included. But like we want more time to go to Rampart Range and like walk around and like be in the water and go camp. And like, dude, do you want to go to work tomorrow? Like work is this dirty word. Like, do you want to go to work in your cubicle, or you want to go like skydive like into a river and then paddle boat, like gambling trip together? And it's like, I'll do that, but I can't get paid. And it's like, okay, how do we get paid to do this? How do we, empower people to do this shit? And so that's kind of my job, is taking it from the cloud and applying it. My like little fucking marketable tagline is like, I apply macro level strategic principles and discoveries to micro level tactical decisions. And it's like, I take it from the cloud to the ground. Like I bring it from heaven to your door or whatever. Like, I'm like the best salesman there's ever been. But
that's the whole tagline, right? From heaven to the door, so you can fucking suck.
So yes. And this is the legacy that I want to leave through this mental health journey. But yeah, man, I'm going to change this mental health system, and I've got the plan. Got a big nod the other day from foundation CEO founder guy with a lot of pull, getting some nods from some big, a big resource in the medical community out in LA and Palm Springs. Just getting the troops rallied, right? Like there's this book, there's this old Special Forces Green Beret major. His name's Jim Gant, and Jim Gant wrote a book called American Spartan. And Jim Gant also wrote a textbook called One Tribe at a Time. One Tribe at a Time was the only piece of literature on bin Laden's desk, right? I wasn't there, so don't quote me, but whatever, from what I've pulled from books and reading and stuff. So if there is a team dude out there listening to it, fact check me and get with me. 765-432-8600. And let me know, hand me this ass. But no, it was the only thing he had. And it was like, kill this man, because this dude gets it. And he understood that when he comes into Afghanistan, he's like, man, there are all these, it's tribal, it's a tribal land, right? And there are all these Pashtuni tribes out there. And we have this American force coming in that's trying to like democracy, roads, like same as Alexander, right? We do such a bad job as Americans studying and really studying, like listening and reading and having that full spectrum understanding. Full spectrum is my favorite word, because we have to understand, like Alexander tried to do it, the Russians tried to do it. Like, I'm in high school and middle school studying Spetsnaz Russian battle plans. And I'm like, I'm kind of weird. Like, you're weird. Like, yeah, like I'm a little different, like that's what I spent my life doing, was learning war and like understanding the international community and things like that. And so he understands, he comes in and he's like, oh, fuck, like we got to start one tribe at a time. That's what he calls the pamphlet, the manual, one tribe at a time, right? It's rewriting like counterinsurgency and foreign internal defense, all that shit, whatever. And so I was like, fuck, man, like this is the boat crew thing. Like because each of us are our own little tribe, right? Like there are 3 stages in a team, and it's formation, growth, and sustainment. Formation is that hard motherfucking point. You got to bring in all these fucking pieces and try to like keep them there, like really until they form, right? Like I'm herding dickless chickens, and I'm like, get over here, you sons of bitches. Like we can make more money together. There's infinite money and there's infinite freedom if we all just work together, and it's a scaling process too. Like Jesus, like if we all 3 work together, we can go so far. But if we start working with like more people, and then the city, and then this nation, and then the world, it's like, if we all just fucking work together, like, hey, Putin, can I get some of your fucking Legos? Like I'm trying to finish them. No, like, okay, come on, like you're not, but it's scalable. And that's why it's like a legacy worth living, is because you're building this powerful foundation and nucleus that's spreading out. Like I think of myself as like a new reinvented Jim Gant in the civilian society. And like, God, I'd love to meet you, Jim. But Jim, if you're out there, I'm doing it one tribe at a time, like trying to rally these people for cross promotion, cross platform promotion, SEO shit, like more hits, more, because we're fighting this algorithm, right? Like everything is fighting an algorithm, because like there's 1 million people that have 7 billion people or 9 billion people, who gives a fuck, people out there that are like, what I say matters. And they're like, well, I'm going to create my own thing. I'm going to do this. I'm like, well, okay. And I told this to the foundation owner. I was like, and CEO guy, I'm like, look, so I know 2 things. I know that you don't need, and small business owners, foundation owners, anyone, we don't need more time taken from us. So I don't need to show up asking you for your time. And you don't need any more money going out the door. So I can't show up and ask for money. Those are 2 most important things, right? Like the freedom coupon and time. And so I'm like, okay, I don't have those to work with. So I scrubbed those off my graph paper. I'm like, okay, I don't have freedom. all right, I don't have money and I don't have time. So now what do I have to work with? And I'm like, fuck. Okay, we have each other to work with. Okay, we still have each other. I still have all these tribes. And this is me staying up late at night on mushrooms and LSD and fucking Vyvanse and going nuts. And I'm like, okay, I got to do this. And I'm like looking like a fucking tweaker over at the kitchen, you know, like just writing it. I'm in my underwear. I'm naked. I'm like, oh yeah, like let's go. Because this mission matters. This legacy matters. And so I'm drawing it out and I'm like, okay, we have people. How do we work with people? How do we incentivize people to work together? And I'm like, okay, everyone talks about hating the internet and hating social media. Okay, great. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay, I have this tech at my thing. So how do we use it to make money and create time and create money? So I was like, okay, I know we get monetized on like site hits and traffic and advertisements and things like this and SEO and spinning around. And I'm like, okay, what if we all just fucking link together? And it's like, oh my God, okay. Like we have all these dots. Like we're each these dots. We've got to start connecting dots, motherfucker. Like we're on this board and it's all on this here. And we're each our own dots and tribes. And like, boys, we can find the right answer if we all line up. We find that hypotenuse, right? And so that's what I'm doing is like creating this magnet, right? My hypotenuse is a magnet and I'm drawing all these tribal dots into my magnet so we can continue on this trajectory, right? And that's what I'm doing is I guess ultimately what I'm going to end up being is that like is really just a Jim Gant connector. And I'm going to make people money passively through doing that. And then more hits, more this, more sponsorships, more everything. And then it makes it a no-brainer for your investor, your guy with all the Delores, you know, with all the freedom coupons to come in and say, okay, this is brilliant. I buy it. Here you go. And so we have those dudes on deck. It's like, but I'm one man and I'm also one crazy man that's trying to like deal with all this PTSD and all this trauma. And it's tough, man. And it's tough. Like, it's honestly tough, like trying to stay alive doing it because it's a lot. And you have moments where you're like, God, I'm the craziest, dumbest, biggest piece of shit in the world. Like I'm so nuclear that nobody likes me. And like, straight up, like in my lowest moments, like a 4th of July, like I spent my 4th of July, like falling myself to sleep on my couch alone, like with my dog. Like that's a really hard for me. Like the holidays are hard for me. And like, I am alone and I don't have people I can like reach out to that will like cover ground for me. And people that I did or thought I did, you know, like they abandoned me. And it's like being a good dude is like something that should be revered, excuse me. It's not like 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 actions. It's consistently. It's that like understand what ride or die means. Like ride or die means like picking the phone up when it's 3 a.m. if you hear it or you see that text and like I'm on my fucking way. Like, dude, that's what it is. And like, yeah, you're not gonna get as much sleep and I'm tired. But like, bro, like don't talk the talk. Like don't be about that. Like I'm ride or die, gang. Like I'm a good dude, gang. But like you did like a couple things and you're like, oh, it's cool. Like he needs to figure it out. Like, dude, like, fuck you. Like I will always cover ground for anybody. Like I will be there. And like, I put that out on social media all the time. Like I give my phone number away like religiously because like, dude, if you need something or need someone to talk to, like I'm there. Now the other side of that balance is like, hey bro, like I'm in meetings too. Like I'm at the hospital too. And like, I'm doing things and like, I'll call you back. Like my big homie, Frank. But I was like, can I call you back tomorrow? And then I was like, didn't think about myself and I like broke the thing, a little pat on the back here. And I was like, are you okay? Are you good? And he's like, oh yeah, man. Like, I just want to have some things I really need to share with you. I was like, okay, can we like link up like tomorrow? Like, is that cool? And he's like, yeah, man, faux show. And so it's like making sure it's like good. And like also not making sure it's good through like words, but like through tone and demeanor. Like you really like, no, motherfucker, are you good? Because it sounds like you're about to drink some bleach. And I will make time. But like we also like that's that respect and like meeting it at the middle of like I also have some things to do and I'd also like to sleep, but like being willing to like cover that ground, you know. So that's my legacy is I'm going to change the mental health system. I have the way forward at the tactical level, at the strategic. We have the strategic, I have the operational, I have the tactical level covered, and I'm getting good now, like sober, getting like healthier with this trauma and like rebalancing all these chemical things. So now, like I went, like you talking earlier, like I know what it feels like to like not be able to do something. I know what it feels like to like not be able to like literally like get up off the floor. Like I know what it feels like to like wake up in your living room and be like, how did I get here? Or like now I'm thinking back like to my dad and my parents came out here to kind of take care of me when I was, you know, through May and you know, thank God for them. I remember being on my hands and knees, like almost naked, like on the floor. And my dad like puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, "Hey son, like let's go to bed." And I was like, "I don't know how I got here, Dad. Like, I don't know how I'm here. And I don't know if I'm gonna make it through this one." And a lot of moments like that, having both your parents, I'm 27 years old, tattooed to fuck, and I'm a hard motherfucker, but knowing what it feels like to lay in bed with both of your parents at that age in the middle of them and have your mom scratch your back, like to go to sleep, like that shit is not fun to share. This is why legacy matters. Legacy matters because there are so many people that are going through this stuff that if you choose to not get out of your bubble and you choose to remove and detach, people are dying. Like people are really dying. And people are dying worse than literal deaths. People are dying a long, slow death by what we've created as society. There are things worse than death that I found.
Living is a lot harder.
Yeah, living is tough, and dying is tough. Coming to grips with dying and thinking about all the people that you're going to affect and understanding it and still wanting to die so bad, having this addiction to death and self-harm is so fucked. This is why the legacy matters. I'm not going to stand by anymore. I got sent to a psych ward again naturally, and I had a psychiatrist tell me to shut up. He put his hand on my face because he said he already knew who I was and what I was, and again immediately misdiagnosed me and tried to change my medication. Told me that all the doctors that I've been working with and was working with at the time, like these fancy dudes that have been on Rogan and big deal guys now, that he's like, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, you need this. And I held my 20-year-old roommate while he cried. He's an army kid. They got frustrated and said, some dipshit, was enforcing some dumbass rule. That's and he's like, this kind of shit is the kind of shit why people kill themselves. This is the shit that makes me want to kill myself. And he ends up in the psych ward. And he's he told me I was never getting out of here. And I'm done with that. I will have these places fucking bulldozed. This is not right. I watched my homie, who's a badass, long time Air Force medic vet now, be denied fucking Benadryl for his migraines and shit. Took him 4 hours to get him and to get a Benadryl. They tried to silence me and they told me I had COVID. They put me in isolation in there because I was causing so much of a ruckus. I was like, this is fucking bullshit. They tried to not let me use the phone. They tried to put me in a different ward. They put me in the isolation room, and they were like, you have COVID. And I was like, I had COVID back in March and I am fully vaccinated. Fuck you. You didn't even do a COVID test. And they're like, well, we're waiting on your COVID results. And I was like, no, you guys are fucking there are liars and thieves in these places. Horrible evil is going on. And I look at the people in there that are so strung out and not on drugs anymore. Well, yeah, on big pharma. And they've lost their minds and they've lost hope. And I know what it feels like to be hopeless and see people that are hopeless. That's why legacy matters. This legacy is powerful, man.
So you've talked about the things that you want to leave, the things you want to change. When you look at where you've been, where you're at currently, where you want to go, where do you feel that you're living your legacy? Where do you feel the pieces that you're building to help attribute to that you can turn around and say that not only did I build it, but I experienced it. I taught other people how to experience it, things like that. Most
definitely. You have to be about it, right? That's the biggest thing, right? And that has helped me get into better shape, right? Because I gave up, I was fucking just pounding food, not working out. And I was, getting high all the time and doing all this shit. And I was hold the phone. I was get back up. I was I'm not embodying this physical part, right? So now it's dude, I fucking don't care. I'll film myself and film messages when I'm running or lifting, or take pictures, and physically I'm trying to rid my body of all this poison that we take in, right? And so I know all this shit about inflammation, but I had also forgotten a lot of it. And how important inflammation is to fucking your head and your emotional health and your physical health and all these things that we put in. But last night, for example, I got high and I was so depressed that, I got high and I went to Dairy Queen and got I got a large dipped cone and I got a large blizzard. And I was I'm going to hate myself. I'm going to hate myself. I had to yawn in 10 seconds. And then today I've just been shitting myself. And I was man, I didn't feel good. And so it's reinforcing that. And also how you lead and how you're like about it, like how you're living like right now is like also being honest about that, like owning it. Like, like, oh, really, Riley? Like, you don't have a six pack? And it's like, you're right, because I'm not perfect. Like, you're right. I did fuck up and eat that Dairy Queen. And like, you're right. I realized that I was fucking up when I was doing it. And, but I'm still coming back. I'm still putting the miles in, like running. I'm still lifting my ass off and like hiking and taking care of the dog and doing things. And so mentally, like I'm still reading, I'm still podcasting, you know, listening. Like I'm working on, you know, finishing up like a comedy special so I can like go to 3E's and I go to Denver and like unveil. I'm like building up the courage because like I lost a lot of confidence in myself, and just like when I went through this last shit in the last couple of months, like I felt pretty confident, and I lost a lot of that. Like it really like, man, it just drove me into the ground. And so I'm trying to get confidence where I can come back and be this entertainer that I am and like want to be like at the public level on big stages. I'm like, I got a lot of funny shit like that I want to put out there. And comedy is like this great mess, you know, this great medicine, right? Like, and so like that's like part of the mental thing is like continuing to like grow and learn and push through. And like, you know, I had to move, you know, chop wood, carry water, like next to my bedside. So like when I'm struggling to get to sleep, I'm like, remember what you're doing. Remember why you're doing this. Like you're building the foundation, bro. Like you're not crazy. You're not crazy. And then I'm like, well, you're crazy, but you're still building the foundation. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, I'm not out of the fight. Like I didn't just like, I'm not like just like barreling in. So like the mental health thing, like the mental health, I'm like showing out on that. The physical health, I'm showing out like this full spectrum thing. And then the spiritual thing, like I certainly battle that, right? Like I certainly tend to like lean more towards like the Buddhist stuff and like more towards like, you know, like on my Hinge profile, it's like spiritual, you know, I'm not like, you know, I don't believe in like the whole established religion thing. Like I have my own like spiritual beliefs instead of like getting outside of myself and the arrogance of being like, I don't believe in shit. Like I believe in me and I believe that it all goes black. It's like, well, like I believe that like you're not going to go that far. Like I believe that your ceiling is pretty limited, and it's also a pretty quick way to get cynical and like just focus on yourself. Like if you believe in these higher things, like whatever it may be, I am showing out on that, you know, like, and I do preach that shit and I talk about that shit. And so, did I answer that question, homie? Like, I get to spiraling because I have so much. I don't talk to like a lot of people that like I'm just like talking to myself and like all the people on my like round table up here. And so when you ask me a question, it's like, do you really want to talk to me? Like, do you really want to ask? Like,
well, so the first time, right? I remember it was almost a month. We had asked you a question and you came back and responded through Messenger like a month later, right? Because you were like, I really need to think about that. And the crazy part is that you really go back and you do, right? I remember the book that you have everything, you write stuff down.
Straight up.
You know what I mean? And so that's how I know that like you're going to be doing big stuff because you're building all the knowledge you're building and watching and observing the way that other things have, why they crumble, why they failed, why they work, why they succeed. Not many people go on that level, right? And it's so much further and so much more superior than even successful people are doing it now. That was one of the things that I took away from that first night that we met, and the second time when you came and did the live with us, was like, that dude has been through some shit, and I genuinely believe all the stuff that you said, but it was like, but watch what he does with it. Watch where he goes with this, right? And that's why when Scott was like, what do you think about the podcast? I was like, absolutely.
For sure. I appreciate it.
You know what I mean? So what I love and what I feel like is that like a lot of us, just like most people, we're still trying to figure it out. But from the aspect that you've kind of already come from, like you said, killing yourself, right, to where you're at, you are on, I feel like, a deeper level because you already know yourself and you know the things you're capable of from one perspective, but you're yearning to see what that other perspective looks like of what you're still capable of in that same capacity. So maybe the term nuclear that you've thrown out there a couple of times, right, it has been used kind of in this negative format. But what happens if you're nuclear now on this other side, right? Which I think we're waiting for you to figure that out, because and once that does, game over for everyone.
No, yeah, dude, I really appreciate that. And I went on this. I love being naked, right? Like, as everyone knows, or anybody that gets to meet me, like I love being like, I'm so sweaty right now. Like I hate wearing clothes. Like I went on this Irreverent Warrior hike out here, right? Like when I was in Colorado Springs, it's like a vet thing. I wore my Sangha and like fucking nothing else, like I'm in my bikini, bro. Like, and naturally, like I got to meet some pretty interesting people just by standing out, like another thing I learned from Evan, the dude that, the guy from Six, like he is a, what is that called? The rescue skier dude, ski patrol.
Yeah.
And so he gets out of the teams, and he's been serving forever, the point where he's over at tier 1, asset, and he's all broke to fuck and all these things. He moves out to Utah, and he's like, I'm going to be a fucking ski patrol. Like, fuck him. Like, I'm going to do it. And he's like, man, everybody wants to be ski patrol, it turns out. And like, it's like really hard to get to like this point and like do this like backwoods, like rescues and all these things. And so he's like, man, like, lesson 1 in selection, like you got to stand out. So he's like, okay, how do I stand out? All right. And so he gets like this big ass cardboard thing, and he like puts pictures and like shoves it in, and everyone else is like, the classic 9x11, like printed out on paper. And he's like, I just look like a fucking tool bag. Like mine's just like out there in front of everyone. And I was like, man, that's what I've always done. Like I've always like striven to like, cause you'll just like, don't be a gray man, right? Like for me, it's like you can float through as a gray man, or you can choose to chase that greatness. And so, I meet Joe. I see he's got this N-Star, the Naval Academy logo on this polo, this old dude. I walk up and nobody else, he's kind of like straggling behind, and I'm at the back too, because this is like hard for me, I'll be like around people, and like there's a lot of like chest beaters and yellers, and I'm like, fuck man, like you give me the shakes, like. And so I'm like kind of hanging out at the back, and I see him, and we're at the park, and I meet him, and we start talking. And then like I didn't go on with the hike, man. Like I'm in the park talking with Joe for like 3 hours, and then we went to lunch, and like now I met him again, and like now I'm at his like steps, or his wife, her son, he called him his son, whatever, you know what I'm saying. But Joe and I talk about this nuclear thing, and he's like, man, like like you got to make your weaknesses your positives, and I'm like, I think the nuclear thing is positive. And we both came to the conclusion, like, man, you know what? Like, he's like, the only, and I'm bawling, I'm an emotional guy. And cause I know where he's going. I feel like I've got a lot of telepathy. And like, once you get on a certain vibration, it's like, you already know where the motherfucker's going. And like, I know it's frustrating for some people that I'm on that wavelength with, cause it's like, shut up, brother. I know where you're going. Like, stop it. But he's like, man, like, what turns like, like sand into glass is like, it's, the heat of 1,000 suns in the form of lightning or a nuclear blast, And I'm like, I'm just trying to be that nuclear. And I was talking to my homie JP last night on Instagram Live about this. I'm like, I'm just trying to be that, like the nuclear sauce that's like, I can contain. And I'm the guy that's like, I'm actually want to be the dude that's like pulling the lever, like when to let it out and when to like, I'm like trying to, like, I'm just trying to be the lever man and like let that sauce out. And everybody knows what that means. It's analogous for everything. Like everything is the same. Like it's the same for flipping the switch. Like I've always trained myself to be a switchboard. Like if someone comes in that room right now, like posing harm, like I'll murder that person. Like gun, no gun, knife, no knife, like whatever. I'll kill that guy. Like too easy. But like if someone else comes in, I need to like, oh, hey, like, what's up, Mr. President? Like, like I can do that too. And so it's like flipping on and levering out that nuclear stuff. Like if I need to rap, okay, I'll rap. Like, do I need to do, so that's what I'm always like striving for with that nuclear thing. And that's being nuclear now. And I talk to my SEAL team homies and my Navy homies and Army guys. And I'm like, we're all so balanced this way towards like violence and murder and aggression. And like, how many chicks can we fuck? And like, how many beers can we drink? And like, it's all like, we all get funneled. Like everyone wants us to just go into this, like the real sweet thing, like is to go and make 6 figures and like, okay, you're big, you made it, like you get the house and the car and 6 figures and my wife is pretty and that's it. It's not really fulfilling. And I see all these dudes and they're dead. And like, I'm like, dude, I remember what you were like when you were an animal, like in selection. Like I remember when you were covered in piss and blood and mud and like you, that was something that like that, where's that you, bro? And it's like, well, I sold it for a paycheck and a hot wife and a car. And it's like, oh man, that sucks. And like, oh yeah, aren't you worried about being homeless? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, but I'm trying to rebalance the scales because I'm like, I know I can. Like I'm gonna do music. Like when my homie, like I'm doing music and like, my buddy's moving out and like he's like a music pro. And I'm like, I'm stoked to like figure out what that right sound is and get in there. Cause I started rapping for therapy. And like, I play Call of Duty when I like had the big belly and I'm like, have my phone here and put on Rap Chat. I got that premium Rap Chat. And so I got the beats going and I'm just rapping away, thugging, and it was a good time, man. And it actually kept me alive, multiple times. One time in the psych ward, because they told me like I'm never getting out, I'm in isolation, and I'm standing in the shower and it's cold. And you have to keep pressing not how much everybody knows about psych wards, but like you don't get a knob. And so I'm like pressing this like metal button to spray out more water. Give me more water. Give me more water. And I have such a bad panic attack that I shit all over myself and just like covered in yellow diarrhea, blasted against the wall. I look like that chick in Hall Pass when she sneezes and there's shit blows shit. And Jason Sudeikis is no longer like having sex with her or whatever. But dude, I'm covered in my own shit, and I'm like bawling, and I'm like I'm almost like dry crying because I don't have any tears left, right? Like and then I start throwing up because I'm covered in my own poop, and I'm so depressed. And I started beating my head against the wall. I get numb, and then I'm beating it hard, and now I'm ready to die. And I know what it feels like to like take yourself to that level with blunt force trauma. And I know what it feels like to go there. And so they wouldn't keep me there longer. In my head, before I like bashed my head in, I got to the point where like my ears are ringing. And then I hear one of my tracks that I made, and it's called Lil Bitta. And it's about shitting your pants from an anxiety attack in the morning and then going through your whole day with poop in your pants, like on a date at work and like all this shit. And I got this flow about it. And it's like this funny, dumbass song, but it's more than that. It's like, it's okay. Like you can have a little bit of poop and still move and groove. And I started laughing, and I looked like the Joker. Like I bawled my eyes throughout the Joker, like a lot of people did, this new one with Joaquin Phoenix. And I think a lot of people, like what frustrates dudes is like people think they're the Joker. And I'm like, you don't know what it feels like. You don't know what it means to actually be the Joker.
Right.
And I have the capacity to be the Joker and cause absolute anarchy and destruction, or I have the capacity to be Batman. And like that's like I study Batman a lot, and I think about when he's holding the Joker over that building, he saves him or whatever, and he's like, you're just like me or whatever, and he lets him live. And like as a kid I was always like, fucking blow his brains out, and then I'm like, damn man, like I get it now. Part of me still wants him to blow his brains out because I'm like, yeah, I gotta stop doing all the killing. Like, like at a certain point, like ISIS, for example, like that's not like a Pashtuni tribe. That's like we go in there and we fucking murder those people, So there's certain people that got to get murdered. They got to get them fucking heat. Most people don't need that heat. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, you don't need to kill yourself. And I'm like, I'm trying to choose to be Bruce Wayne and not the Joker.
Have you seen the animated movie or read the cartoon or the comic really of Batman and the Joker called The Killing Joke? It was a novel that was actually written. They actually did a movie for it probably a decade ago, maybe a little bit less. But in that particular novel, there's a fan theory out there that Batman either kills the Joker, or it's symbolism that Batman and Joker are one and the same.
Yeah. It's
also the fan theory that Batman needs the Joker. And, so when you watch it, you watch it, you have your own conclusions. Some people swear that there's a neck break at the end, because you can't see it. You just hear very subtle. And so some people are like, that's him killing the Joker. Some people saying that's him dropping him, letting him go. But it kind of leaves it for fan conclusion. Right?
And there's a reason for that. Like what you just said, it's like your own interpretation.
Right. And that's the beauty of it, right? So I highly encourage you, because you talked about that. And again, like why the Joker movies and why he resonates so much is because a lot of us, we resonate with that broken piece, and we don't have the opportunity to talk about it. We don't talk about it often enough. We sit there and we look at ourselves in the mirror, and we can't help but laugh at it a lot of times, because if we don't, it will kill us.
And I think the point I kind of get to, it's like Santa Claus, like, man, until you're laughing in the mirror with a pile of your own throw up and yellow diarrhea in a psych ward, and you're laughing maniacally, like, don't tell me you're the Joker, bro. Like, but we each have it inside of us. And you're right. Like, you can go either way. And I'm like, man, I could be Batman or I could be Bane. And they had the same, it's this balance thing that I always talk about. It's a balance beam, like, and it's a dynamic process. And like, that's the story of like the foolish old man and the wise old man. Like, you can always slip and fall, and you can always, you're constantly trying to keep everything, the balls in the air. I like to think of it as scales, or, like a teeter totter. And it's like, now I could just say, fuck it. And I could start killing people. I could be the Bane. Or, like I listen all the time, like almost not exclusively, but sometimes exclusively, to this audio that I ripped and put on Spotify. And it's like Batman Rises, like from the pit, part 1, Batman Rises from the pit, part 2, and then part 3. And I listened to it, and it ends up with what I got on my knuckles, which is Deshi Bashara. And it means rise, or he rises. And it's like Batman going in, no rope, to jump out of the pit and make it, and it forces him to like deal with fear and harness the fear. And like Bane was in the pit too, and he was mistreated. And you kind of learn like, okay, he probably deservedly so could be this madman, just like we all could be. Like, you would understand why, like, who was that dude in like Longmont or whatever that had that it's that Netflix thing where he went nuts and had the armored truck and like kills everybody. And like, yeah, he had like terrible, that gives me chills, but it's like, yeah, he had terrible circumstances, and like, you can understand how he got there, but it's not okay. Like, Jesus, you don't just go killing people, like, but like it's fragile. We don't understand how. And I just heard Jack Carr and Rogan say it on a podcast recently. And Jack Carr, the SEAL team commander, big author now. And he's like, society is so fragile. And Duncan Trussell says it too. And it's like, it can slip. And like, we are society. We create society. So what we're saying is we are so fragile.
Yes.
Like, people are one fucking road rage thing away from fucking shooting somebody or cutting somebody or cutting themselves or shooting themselves. And it's like, man, becoming the Joker or becoming Bane, and these people that are emulating them and like think they're doing this vigilante justice, right? And like this anarchist shit. And like, you can see why. And you start studying, you get smart. You're like, oh shit, I understand the argument. It's not just like, oh, they're a bunch of dumb kids, whatever. It's like, oh no, fuck, like I get it. And you start really getting educated on things, and you start finding that you're right at this middle, just like we all are, or hope to be, right? And like, when you get to the middle, actually, if you start getting too far to one side, like, like the anarchists or like fucking right dudes, conservatives or leftists or all these titles, I'm like, isn't your name Jim? Like, I'm Riley. Like, I'm not at this title. Like, I'm Riley, and like sometimes I'm Flaming Dragon, and sometimes I'm B, and like, you know what I mean? Like,
I feel like a lot of people, when they start going a little bit more extreme on one side to the other, that's where they find acceptance.
Yeah.
Right? Because you find that other people have been fighting this whole thing, right? And now all of a sudden you have common ground that's pushing that. And I love that you're talking about this, because Scott knows this. I've used the Joker, I've used the Batman references all the time. I've done live streams talking about just Joker quotes. I've talked about live streams about what if Batman was actually the bad guy? What if the Joker was actually the good guy, right? What if it's a combination of the two? I've done my own personal research on the different things, right? I have a new theory that I've yet to share with anybody, so I figured now's a good time than anybody.
My sister.
When you look at all the villains, right? Besides Batman, Spider-Man is really the only person that has had like a huge amount of villains that basically have always piled up on it, right? But when you look at the difference in a lot of those villains, is that not maybe the different emotions that we go through, right? Bane being the anger, the Riddler, right? Always questioning ourselves and the things that we do, and always having to figure out things
insecurity,
the hard
maybe,
way. Yeah, exactly. Two-Face is being that piece where like, are we truly being authentic? Right? Are we really going through the stuff? And then the Joker is the wild card. It's just like, you don't know what you're going to get.
Sure. Or psychosis, right? Or something like that.
Right.
Psychotic.
Yeah, because life is very difficult, and it maybe we feel like it should be a little bit more random, but also at the same time, there's that safety and security blanket where we don't want it to be, So I kind of think that like a lot of those reflections of those villains or of those characters is really a lot of it is Batman fighting or projecting himself.
Oh my God. I mean, I think it's brilliant. I totally agree. Right. And like, there's no one right answer. Like, well, that's not actually like, that's not no, dude, it's a theory. And it's like, it can also be, that's like the beauty of this, like art, right. Of all of art and all of this life is like, there are multiple interpretations, and it's back to the dart or the board where it's like, okay, like we're back on this. Here's the origin, X, Y. Here's Pat's theory. Here's this theory. Here's this theory. Here's this. And finally, you get a line you can draw through after you get 7 billion theories. And you're like, oh, shit, there's the closest thing we have to a right answer. I think that's beautiful. And why, like, we understand why if we think about it, right? Like why these people do these things and why the systems are broken and why it's easy to go to these extremes, right? It's for acceptance. Because it's the lazy man's thing. You fall prey to fear and complacency, you're scared to try to get back to the center because you're getting pushback from this side and you're getting pushback from this side. So it's like, fuck the world. I'm just gonna fuck it. I know my balance isn't right, but that's fine because these people accept me. And that's like when I hear like people saying like, this is my mom again. And she's like, well, I like the way I am. And I'm like, do you, or do you like the poison? Like, do you like that poison inside you? Because like, and I talked to a bunch of my boys about this, like, well, I just like listening to the sad alternative music. I'm like, is that you, or is that the poison? Is that Harvey Dent, or is that the monster? Is that Two-Face? And like Two-Face is like, I think it's certainly the easiest, like, person to use because it's like, oh, was the good guy, but now he's the bad guy. And it's like, yeah, we all have that, but it's like one person. And we all have that shit. It's certainly like to the extremes. And a lot of it comes down to like this chemistry and this inflammation and this medical thing that I will beat the doors down because now I have access to top level shit that like, I'm looking at every single chemical in my body and rebalancing it. And like people don't have access to this stuff. That's why we have to get organized to make it more affordable, to make it to the masses and all this shit. It's going to be a goddamn near impossible fight, but maybe I'll have to be banned sometimes. But maybe I'll have to pull out that Deadpool thing. But no, and then what we do is we lazily, right? Like dudes that are at the center, hopefully we're fighting and being self-aware enough to be like, oh no, wait, they're not just the title. Like we can't just lump them left and right. It's like when people say like, oh yeah, I'm a liberal. I'm like, well, no, you're not. No, like, yes, I am. Or like, I'm a conservative. I'm like, well, are you? And I'm like, they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do you think about this and why? And then you start uncovering it. And like this thing that keeps coming back to me is like, oh, like we're not so different, you and I. Like, oh shit, like we're all at the end of the day trying to suck and fuck. Like it's the same core thing, man. It's the same thing. Like, bro, like if I vote for X or vote for Y, like who allows me more freedom coupons to suck and fuck? And it's like this guy, okay, fuck it, you can have it. Like, and that's like the thing. Like, well, he said he was going to give us more stimulus money. Well, he said he was going to build this to give us more freedom. Well, he said, and it's like, we end up as Spider-Man meme, everybody pointing. But dude, when we start putting these labels on, because it's like, oh, you can't label me, like I'm more than a label. It's like, you're right. But scientifically and medically, we have to think about it from, we sort of have to put some labels on to diagnose things. And so I realized that like when I get mad at like medical professionals, and there's a lot of reasons to get mad at medical professionals, as a scientist and as an analytical thinker, you have to say, okay, how do we solve a problem? We can't live at the cloud. And so we have to put some things in some categories and find the common threads so we can start properly treating and diagnosing and doing these things. But like the biggest category of all is that we're human, motherfucker. Like we're energy, you sons of bitches. Like why the fuck are we killing each other in the streets and dogging each other down and cutting each other down? And the one category and the one title I need is human, like not even American at that point, like human. Like guys, this shit it's simple. It's not easy. And you start talking about resources and protection, and it's a big trust factor, right? That like, okay, I spend more on healthcare and not as much on defense. God damn it, we got bombed. I told you we were going to get bombed. And then you create right and left because it's like, it's not even right and left yet. It's Adam and Joe. Adam said we needed to keep spending more money on fucking defense budget. And Joe said, no, we need to save the people. And I'm over here saying, can we please meet in the middle? And they're like, but if we meet in the middle, we're not going to have the nukes. And I'm like, we can have it all if we just work together, damn it. And like, it's this Alexander method. I'm Alexander the Great in this motherfucker. Like I read that dude. I've read that dude my whole life religiously. And I'm like, I will make you my friend first. Like my job is to recruit you into my army and additionally become part of your army, right? And form this syndicate that is impossibly, undeniably powerful. And if you just kill everybody, like I love when like my buddies are like, yeah, man, or like a chick, like a homegirl or whatever, that's like, oh yeah, I popped off. And they're so proud that like they pop off on a motherfucker or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I bet that got you some serious results, didn't it? Like, no, like it got you a bunch of friction and hatred, potentially your job, potentially your fucking livelihood. I'm like, dude, no, like always seek to work with people. And I talked to my homie Jake today about this and, about leadership and about like his business. And I'm like, man, like, he's like, I really don't know like what I'm doing. They're really like not putting me to use. And it's frustrating. And like, and they're still like hiring all these people. And I'm like, bro, the answers, like, you got to look first in your existing materials and your existing team. Like, It's just like smart budgeting, like, budgeting talent and people and good leadership. And we have to look like we don't need like more humans. And this isn't a tangent about like we don't need to make kids, like have kids, whatever. But we do need to look at like what we currently have. Like we keep looking and searching for this new answer and this new thing and this new shit and like trying to escape and trying to hide and trying to make and create these new things. And it's like, no, dude, it's like what we need is more people smoking blunts around a campfire. Like all the world leaders, and that's like the joke in Rick and Morty, is he like cures like in 2 seconds, like the president, he's like, oh yeah, like Rick brought about world peace or whatever. And he's like, how'd you do that? Like Sanchez. And he's like, or to one of his generals, and he's like, oh, he got them in some bar and they smoked some kind of conscious enhancing hookah. And like now there's like world peace. And like that's what Rogan says, right? Is like dump DMT into the world's water supply and watch hunger and war and like all this shit. And I'm like, at the time, like being as sober as a gopher, like wannabe warfighter, I was like, man, Joe is so crazy. I was like, I bet he's right, but man, that dude is out there. And now after I've done enough DMT to kill a mule, I'm like, man, he's right. Like, let's go. Like, dump that shit, Like, I feel like we're all this, maybe I talked about it last time, but we're all these cattle, like in this pen being led to slaughter, right? And I feel like I was just that dumb fat cow that was like, man, I'm so hungry, and I just ate the mushroom and I stood up on my back legs and I was like, Jesus Christ, and I like hopped the fence, I was like, this sucks balls, like why are we doing this, guys? Like, and then you find there's actually other dudes out here grazing that hop the fence too. And what's sad is that a lot of these guys, and I think too, just developing this theory, I think there's other cattle that are like, eat that, like still on the side of the thing, and like dudes aren't listening because they're so like, no, they're too afraid to lose their head, because like there's also like their overseers and overwatchers, and like, and then it's like, it's all the same, man. Like we could do this for the rest of our lives, and I will, and we will, like, that's the thing. But
no, I appreciate that. Where at this point in time, what's the best way for fellow legacy ninjas to be able to connect with you?
For sure, yeah, dude, I love the cell phone thing. I'm a big caller, big texter. I don't like business cards. It seems disingenuous to me. So 765-432-8600. You can find me at Riley_Smith_actual on Instagram. I mean, fucking email riley.j.smith42@gmail.com. Like, yeah, I'm just getting my presence out there, right? Like, it's not, from where I come from, it's not cool to like be a media guy and be like all this stuff. And then I was like, oh, actually everyone can fuck themselves that has like the hate stuff. So no, anybody's welcome to hit me up. Like I'm a pretty nice guy. I won't talk about sucking and fucking all the time, I promise. Like I will listen and not transmit all the time, but shit, guys, I had a good time. Like,
I appreciate it. Ultimately, as we're finishing up here, anybody that's listening to this as a legacy ninja that's looking to dig, if you're in a trouble spot, you're in that mental trouble spot and you need somebody to talk to, I highly recommend reaching out. Patrick, Riley, anybody, any of us here you can reach out to.
Yes.
So of course we do have the hub through the pod page that you guys can go check out, and there is a link in there where people can leave, if you want to, a voice message of anything that resonated with you, anything that you don't agree with. We're very open to hear the differences because it makes us who we are as humans. And so that's another way for you as our community, as legacy ninjas, to connect and just have another way to give back and be yourself and get heard.
Yeah, and we're also going to launch a clubhouse for to have more interaction. Well, I would love for you to join us to be able to have that, so that way if people do have questions, we can answer in real time. So we'll definitely reconnect with you if you're open to doing something like that.
no, I'm down, baby.
So, but no, truly appreciate the support that we have, everyone that's coming in and becoming part of the community as a legacy ninja. Ultimately, each of us have a story, a message, have something that we're building. And what we're here for is creating that community where you can start extracting it and really pulling it deep and really finding truly what that is for you, for what you're trying to build. That way, when you're gone, that's the remembering point of what you left and what you've created. And so it's just the growth point, really finding and helping you find that extraction point. So other than that,
We just got the last two segments. So while you load up the pod decks, the hot seat for the power of gratitude and thankfulness. So is there anybody at this point in time that maybe you would like to publicly acknowledge or thank? We just feel, and one of the things that we're learning through our journey is just how powerful even just thanking somebody or remembering something publicly or out loud. And there's so much power in regards to that. So is there anybody at this point in time that you want
Yeah,
to
absolutely. Thanks, Pat, for asking that question. And thank you guys so much for your time and having me on. Again, like the brevity thing, like I'll figure that out maybe when I'm like 107. But dude, no, I want to thank certainly like the first two people that come to mind are absolutely like my mom and my dad, right? Like they are people that will cover ground for each of their children no matter what. And they've proven it thousands of times over. I'm so very fortunate for them. They are the two people that sit on my small circle to my left and to my right. They are absolute ride or die folks. And although we get in our arguments and have our quarrels and disagreements and things, there's no love lost. And man, I can't say thank you enough to them. And I can't wait to where when the riches do come, I can't wait to hook those dudes up. And certainly to my homeboy Bronson Chancellor, he is someone that's been there every goddamn step of the way. JP Clancy, those dudes are getting after it. In the military, still serving, and just bad dudes that will cover ground for you consistently. And they've always kept up comms and always cared a ton. And so I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but as far as like 4 people, like who you're going to war with, faux show, like done deal.
Yeah, it's awesome. Love it.
So getting into pod decks here, we'll do a couple questions. First one, this comes from the Icebreaker deck. Question is, what kind of person do you want to be in 5 years?
Fuck you. Why would you ask that?
That's the card that came up.
In 5 years, I want to be the person that people look at and they see past the surface level of the sucking and fucking and the language and things like that. And I want them to see someone that truly cares, and they know that, right? Like in 5 years, people are going to not just know my name for the sake of being famous or whatever. They're going to know my name because of the mission that I lead. And they're going to see me as an example. And they're going to understand that they can be that example too, that everyone can choose to be Bruce Wayne and Batman. I want to be seen as a symbol, not as like I got my V mask on, baby. Like, that's 05 November over here. That's from V for Vendetta. That's, remember. Like, that's what that means to me. Anyway, that's the kind of person. What about you guys?
For me, I want to be known for helping, right? I mean, but building that legacy of helping whoever, wherever, whenever. And it is a sacrifice, right? It's a sacrifice of time. It's a sacrifice, which we all know time is the new currency. Mm-hmm. But it's also sacrifice sometimes to family, sacrifice sometimes to my employees, to work, to myself, right? And again, I know that's not always going to be like that, but I want to be known for being able to connect people and help people. And, I kind of think of like Bill Walsh, right, from the 49ers. How many coaches did he have under him that went on to win Super Bowls, and they had coaches? So I kind of look at my coaching and my business and all my network as kind of like, I want to be that Bill Walsh for helping and connecting businesses, local nonprofits, all the different things. And that's my contribution, my philanthropy and philanthropic endeavors is basically being able to help the people that are basically responsible for all the things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think for myself, and it's building up that way, but ultimately, along with what we're doing with Legacy Digging with Two Native Sons, is to be that person that they know they can come and sit down and talk to and just have that neutral space, non-judgmental, and ultimately that one individual that people are constantly reaching out to, just to have that space that a lot of people don't give them. And that way they can show up and be their true self and their authentic self and live life how they want to live it and be who they're meant to be.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Man, fuck, aren't we so lucky, man? This is so cool, being in a room, even a small room right now, like, or a small circle, but having such like-minded vibrational thought frequency transmission. So cool, so lucky.
So the next one comes from How Dare You? So it is, how did you find out that Santa Claus is not real?
Dude,
what do you mean he's not real?
yeah. Well, hold on. Hold on. You may believe that. Santa Claus is not real. I feel like I was standing in the corner. I was gonna say something about walking in on my dad banging my mom in a Santa suit or something, but I was like, no, don't say that. I was like, no, don't say that. Don't ever say that on air. Definitely not something that's gonna be on the internet ever. No, I think I was in like the corner of my kitchen at our house in Greentown that they actually just moved out of and sold. And I think I feel like I was in the corner closest to like the medicine cabinet. You walk in our door and you go right and you bang that right all the way into the corner. And I feel like my mom at some point told me, for some reason, like I have that in there. I don't really remember it, but I feel like, and maybe how I'd like to spin it is, she was drunk and high and she was hitting me and she said Santa's not real, but she burned me with a cigarette. No, she didn't. I don't know how it came out, but I feel like I was in that corner. Yeah, it's not that cool.
I think I was probably in 3rd grade, and somebody at school had probably said it, and I correlated with the fact that I never got anything that I ever wanted. And so I was like, that sounds just like my parents, right? Because I always heard the word no. So I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah, damn, that's ice cold, man. That makes me feel like such a dick. Damn, I should have fabricated something. Amazing.
I think I just grew out of it. If I remember, this is one of those things that it's like you're trying to remember what it was.
Sure.
And now, as being an adult, it's one of those things that with kids, you're like, how far do we take this?
Right.
How far do we run with this?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but honestly, when I sit and think about it, I don't recall. I think I may have just grown out of it.
Lucky bastard.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably like my mom's gonna fucking call me and be like, you just grew out of it, you stupid dick.
So last one is would you rather your sneeze sound like a siren or a foghorn?
A foghorn, faux show, man. I think a foghorn, there's something like there's something enchanting about like the foghorn, and I also know the foghorn from my time at sea and in the Navy, and so that siren, man, that'll give you the shakes. I think the foghorn is a little more. I think a SpongeBob too. Like I'm like, oh shit, there comes that thick ass Mrs. Puff rolling through, and I'm like, I'm about to get some of that puff, and so I'm gonna go with foghorn every fucking time. That's not even a good question. Change that up.
Hey, that's what it was.
I think I would choose siren because I would run around the house chasing everybody. I'd run up behind people knowing that I was about to fart and pop one with the siren and scare the shit out of people.
It's not farting though, it's sneeze.
Oh, sneeze, whatever.
Everything. What about every bodily function
that
comes out?
Yeah.
Is a fart just a sneeze from the butt?
Yep, exactly.
That's correct. We know there are other forms of sneezes as well.
I think for me, it's I naturally, when I sneeze anyways, it's loud. So it's freaking foghorn all day long. So that's how it normally sounds anyways. So
we always get the best questions with the guests, I feel like, when we load the context, and the best part is that it's anonymous.
That siren answer that you gave was pretty insidious. That's really fucked up, man.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
whatever. I mean, you bring out the worst in me, I guess.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Guys, if thank you so much for listening to this episode. I think this is a much needed pace that isn't pushed often enough to be authentic, to understand really. I mean, despite maybe some of the comedy thrown in here, to cover some of the truths or to kind of absorb it a little bit, at the end of the day, Riley has been super authentic with everything. We can't thank you enough for not only coming in and doing that, but your willingness to be able to do that, because it's not easy, right? And it's not easy to have that, to know what you want to do and how that you want to do it in a big way, because that's a lot of pressure that you have to put on yourself, right? But I think that's a necessary step for you to go nuclear.
Dude, pressure makes diamonds, baby. And I'm just really honored to be here and know you two. And I'm excited to continue to make impact, try to make impact and change. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I will always be here when invited. So, and then I'll invite myself. I don't care. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.